Hey Reddit, I'm Alex, 29, and this Christmas was different. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It wasn't anything obvious, no big argument, no dramatic confrontation, but there was a shift, a small, subtle one that didn't sit right with me. Maybe it was the way my mom dodged my calls when I asked about the Christmas Eve plans. Maybe it was how my dad gave one-word answers when I tried to confirm the usual family dinner, or maybe it was just the general vibe, like I was missing something, like I wasn't getting the full story. I told myself I was overthinking, that I was just being paranoid, but then I found out the truth, and once I did, everything changed. Christmas had always been a big deal in my family. We were the kind of people who did small, cozy get-togethers. No, my parents went all out. A massive tree, a catered dinner, fancy decorations, guests dressed like they were attending a gala, and every year it was the same routine. Christmas Eve dinner at my parents' house, then Christmas morning brunch, then gifts, laughter, and the occasional family argument. It was tradition, so when December rolled around, I assumed this year would be no different. I asked my mom, "Hey, what time should I come over on Christmas Eve?" And she hesitated just for a second, but I caught it, she never hesitated. "Oh," she said quickly, "it's going to be a bit different this year, a little more curated." I frowned. "Curated?" She gave a forced laugh. "Yeah, we're keeping it small. Just immediate family. Nothing personal, sweetie. Just trying to keep things a little more intimate this year." That's when I felt it. That strange, uneasy feeling in my gut. Something wasn't right, but I just nodded, got it, and left it at that for now, because if there was one thing I knew for sure, I wasn't getting the whole story. A few days later, my cousin Mark called. "Hey man," he said casually, "you coming to Christmas Eve this year?" I blinked. "Oh no. Mom said they're keeping it small this year." Silence. Then he let out a nervous laugh. "Oh, all right. Yeah, I think she mentioned that." I narrowed my eyes. "Wait, you're going?" Mark coughed. "Oh yeah, but it's just a small thing." I let that sit for a second, then I asked, "Who else is coming?" Mark hesitated, then tried to change the subject. And that was when I knew I was being lied to. At that moment, I had two options. I could let it go and pretend I wasn't suspicious, or I could find out the truth. And, let's be honest, I was never the kind of guy to just let things go. So I started digging, asking questions, making calls, and what I uncovered was worse than I ever could have imagined. I wasn't going to sit around and pretend everything was normal. The way my cousin Mark stumbled over his words told me enough. There was more to this than my parents just wanting a small Christmas gathering. So I started asking around. Nothing obvious, nothing that would make its way back to my mom or dad just yet. Just small questions here and there. I called my aunt and casually asked if she had talked to my parents about the Christmas plans. She hesitated for a second, then said, "Oh, well, I think they're keeping it a bit more exclusive this year." Exclusive? Since when did a family holiday require exclusivity? I wondered. I kept going and reached out to my other cousin, who had no filter and was usually the last person to be clued into any family drama. "Oh yeah," she said without thinking. "They're having a huge Christmas Eve dinner this year. Super fancy, like black tie and everything." I almost laughed. A small, intimate Christmas Eve dinner, huh? Keeping it low-key, just immediate family, that was complete bullshit. They were throwing a massive event, and somehow I wasn't invited. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. There had to be an explanation, right? Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe they genuinely thought I wouldn't be interested. But deep down, I already knew that wasn't it. I debated confronting them immediately, but instead I waited. I wanted to hear it from them. I wanted to give them a chance to say it to my face. So I did something I knew would force them to be honest. I showed up unannounced. I drove over to my parents' house a week before Christmas, acting like it was just a casual visit. My mom opened the door, her usual smile just a little too tight. "Oh, honey, what a surprise." "Hey, Mom," I said, stepping inside, figuring I'd stop by to see how the Christmas prep was going. She hesitated for a fraction of a second. "Oh, well, it's going to be very simple this year, just keeping it relaxed." I nodded, pretending to go along with it. "Yeah, that's what I heard. Just immediate family, right?" Her lips pressed together. Exactly. I looked around. The house was already decorated more than usual. Christmas lights strung across the entire foyer, expensive floral arrangements on every table, the kind of stuff they only pulled out for big events. I turned to her. So, what's with all the decorations? She stiffened. Oh well, we still want it to feel festive, even though it's small, she laughed. But it was forced, of course. I nodded slowly, then said, Mark mentioned it was a black tie event. Dead silence. Her face drained of color. She recovered quickly. Too quickly. Oh well, you know how Mark is. He exaggerates things. I crossed my arms. So, just to be clear, everyone's invited except me? Her mouth opened, then closed, then she let out a tiny sigh, and that's when I knew it wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't bad communication. They had purposely excluded me, and now I wanted to know why. She folded her hands, choosing her words carefully. Alex, it's not about you. It's just that this year we're inviting some very distinguished guests. I raised an eyebrow. Distinguished? She offered an apologetic smile. People with certain expectations. It's a different crowd this year, more, refined. I let those words sink in. Refined, a different crowd, people with expectations. And suddenly, everything clicked. I wasn't being excluded because of space or because they thought I wouldn't be interested. I was being excluded because I didn't fit into the image they wanted to present. My parents, who had always been a little obsessed with status and appearances, had decided that I, their own son, didn't belong at their perfect little Christmas party. I felt a sharp, bitter laugh bubbling up, but I swallowed it down instead. I just nodded. Got it. My mom looked relieved, as if she thought I was going to just accept it and walk away. Oh, honey, I hope you understand. Oh, I understand perfectly, she hesitated. It's nothing personal. I smiled, though it wasn't a nice smile. Sure, I said. Nothing personal. Then I turned and walked out, and at that moment, I made a decision. If I wasn't good enough for their Christmas dinner, then my money, my time, and my effort weren't good enough for them either. They wanted to act like I didn't exist? Fine. But they were about to find out exactly what that felt like. I walked through my parents' house with my mind racing. I knew my family was obsessed with appearances, but excluding their own son from Christmas Eve because I didn't fit their image, that was a new low. The worst part was how casual my mom had been about it, as if she truly believed I'd just accept it and move on, as if it were normal to prioritize some rich strangers over your own child. I sat in my car for a while, gripping the steering wheel and replaying the conversation in my head. Then I pulled out my phone and opened the family group chat. It was filled with Christmas plans, excited messages about the big night, discussions about the menu, the guest list, the decorations, all happening right under my nose, and nobody had thought to mention that I wasn't included. I stared at the screen for a long time, debating whether to say something. Part of me wanted to call them all out right there, but another part of me wanted to wait and see how far they would go. So instead of blowing up, I simply typed, "Hope everyone has a great time at the Christmas party. Wish I could have been invited." Then I put my phone on silent and drove home. It didn't take long for the messages to start rolling in. First, from my cousin Mark. "Mark, dude, I thought you knew. I just assumed you were busy." "Yeah, right." Then my aunt chimed in. "Own Linda. Oh, sweetheart, I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. Your parents must have meant to invite you." I let that one sit there unanswered. Then finally, my mom messaged me directly. "Mom, Alex, we should talk." I smirked. Too late for that. I didn't answer, and that's when the real fallout began. The next day, my dad called. I almost didn't pick up, but curiosity got the best of me. "Alex," he started, his tone already frustrated. "What's with the dramatic text?" I let out a laugh. "Dramatic? I just stated a fact. I wasn't invited." He sighed. "Look, this is a very specific kind of gathering. It's not personal." "Not personal," I repeated. "Right. Just business, huh? Don't be childish," he snapped. "Your mother and I worked hard to make connections with these people. We need to put our best foot forward, and I'm not part of that best foot forward." The silence told me everything. I took a deep breath, keeping my voice calm. You know what, Dad? It's fine. If I'm not good enough to sit at your Christmas dinner, then you're not good enough to ask me for favors anymore. He scoffed. What the hell does that mean? I smiled. It means exactly what it sounds like. Then I hung up, and I meant it. Over the years, my family had treated me like their personal handyman. I'd fixed things at their houses, done repairs for free, helped renovate their vacation home, all because I was family. But now, I wasn't good enough to sit at their table. That worked both ways. So I decided to see how long it would take for them to need something from me. Turns out, not long at all. 2 days later, my uncle called. I let it go to voicemail. Uncle Tom. Hey buddy, I need a quick favor. The heater at the lake house isn't working, and we've got guests coming. Can you swing by and take a look? I smiled, then deleted the message. A few hours later, my mom texted again. Mom, Alex, can we please talk? I feel like you're taking this the wrong way. I rolled my eyes and ignored it. Then finally, my dad sent one last message. Dad, this is ridiculous. Family helps family. You're being childish. Family helps family, right? Unless that family is inconvenient for their high-class image. I left him on read, and by the time Christmas Eve rolled around, they were panicking. I spent the day relaxing, eating good food, and watching movies, while my phone kept buzzing. Cousin. Hey man, I think your mom's freaking out. You sure you're not coming? Aunt. Alex, honey, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We love you. Mom, Alex, call me now. I didn't. Instead, I waited, because I knew exactly what was coming next. They had ignored me, looked down on me, treated me like an outsider, but now they needed me, and I wasn't going to lift a damn finger. Christmas Eve came and went. I ignored every call, every message. Then, the next morning, my mom sent one final text. Mom, Alex, we need to talk. It's important. I smirked, finally responding. Mio, something wrong? It didn't take long for her to reply. Mom, we need your help. Something's gone wrong with the heating system at the house. The guests are uncomfortable. Your dad thinks you might be able to fix it before brunch. I leaned back, taking my time before responding. Then I typed, Oh, I'd love to help, but I wouldn't want to embarrass your refined guests with my presence. Hope you figured it out. Merry Christmas. Then I turned my phone off, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't letting them use me anymore. They had made their choice. Now they had to live with it. The moment I sent that text, I knew I had finally flipped the script. For years, my family had treated me like their personal handyman. I wasn't available for their home repairs, their last-minute favors, their money-saving shortcuts. I was out, and guess what? They felt it, because suddenly every single thing they used to rely on me for now came with a price tag, and when they realized they couldn't use me anymore, they panicked. My mom tried the guilt trip. Mom, Alex, family is about forgiveness. You can't hold on to resentment forever. I left her on read. My dad tried demanding that I act like an adult. Dad, this behavior is childish. You're proving them right by acting like a petty brat. That one made me laugh. Proving them right by finally standing up for myself. I didn't respond. Then finally, my cousin Mark, one of the few sane people in the family, sent me a message. Mark. Look man, I get it, but are you really never talking to them again? His question made me pause. Honestly, I wasn't actively planning to cut them off forever, but at the same time I wasn't interested in being the only one to put in the effort anymore. So I sent him a simple response. Me, if they ever actually apologize and mean it, maybe, but I'm done chasing after people who don't respect me. He just responded with a thumbs up emoji, and that was that. Months passed, and you know what? I didn't miss them, not once. I thought I'd feel guilty or like I was losing something, but instead, I felt lighter, like I had finally stopped carrying a weight I hadn't even realized I'd been dragging around for years. No more passive-aggressive comments, no more feeling like I had to prove myself to people who never took me seriously, no more being the one everyone called when they needed something, only to be ignored when I wasn't useful. I had peace, and that was worth more than any fake, forced family gathering could ever give me. Then, about 6 months later, I got one last message from my mom. Mom, Alex, I don't know if you'll ever forgive me, but I just want you to know I'm sorry. We were wrong, and I hate that it took losing you to realize it. I stared at the message for a long time. Did I believe her? Maybe. Did I care? Not really, because by the time she finally realized what she had lost, I had already moved on, and I wasn't looking back. After that fateful Christmas, as winter's chills slowly gave way to the tentative warmth of early spring, I found myself in a state of profound reflection. The days that followed were unlike any I had known before. Instead of the familiar hustle of holiday reunions and forced smiles, an unexpected stillness settled over my life. A quiet, introspective silence that demanded I face the truth about my past, my family, and ultimately myself. In those early weeks, I began retracing the steps that had led me to that decisive moment. I recalled every time I had sacrificed my own needs for the sake of maintaining a fragile sense of familial unity. I remembered the long hours spent fixing broken things around the house, the countless favors performed without so much as a word of gratitude, and the subtle, corrosive way in which my feelings were dismissed. Each memory, each small indignity, gradually coalesced into a larger picture, a picture that revealed years of neglect and the persistent erasure of my own identity. I began to see that the real issue was not merely a single Christmas party, but a chronic pattern of devaluing my worth. Determined to understand the roots of this pain, I took the courageous step of seeking therapy. My therapist, Elena, became a guiding light through the murky emotions I had long suppressed. In our sessions, I unearthed layers of guilt, self-doubt, and the lingering belief that my constant availability was a prerequisite for being loved. Elena helped me to see that self-respect is not something to be earned through endless sacrifices, but rather an innate quality deserving of care and affirmation. Gradually, I learned to set healthy boundaries, a practice that felt both foreign and empowering. Each breakthrough in therapy reinforced the idea that I deserved relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. One rainy afternoon, as I sat near my window watching droplets trace delicate patterns on the glass, I began to write a letter. It was a farewell to the old me, the part of me that had allowed family expectations to overshadow my own dreams and desires. In the letter, I poured out my grief for the lost years, the cumulative hurt of never being seen as an equal, and the quiet rage of being treated like an afterthought. Yet, interwoven with that pain was also a sense of liberation. I thanked the past for teaching me hard lessons and vowed never again to compromise my dignity. Writing that letter felt like casting off an anchor, and as I sealed it away, I sensed that a new chapter of my life was beginning. Time passed, and with each new day, I found myself growing into a version of myself I had long forgotten existed. I started reconnecting with old friends, people who had always appreciated me for who I was rather than for what I could do. I revisited hobbies that had once brought me joy, from reading novels that transported me to different worlds to experimenting with painting, which allowed me to express emotions too deep for words. In quiet moments at local coffee shops, I discovered that solitude could be a friend rather than a foe. This newfound time with myself was not loneliness but a chance to explore the depths of my own heart, to nurture a self-worth that had been suppressed for far too long. Despite these personal victories, my relationship with my family remained fraught with tension. Occasional phone calls and tentative messages came from relatives desperate to patch up old wounds. My mother, often fraught with guilt, would recall the days when I was the golden child, a label that now felt both painful and ironic. Yet, those calls were always laced with the familiar patterns of deflection and unspoken apologies. I listened politely, but inside I was resolute. I knew that true healing would require more than just empty words. It would require a genuine effort from them to acknowledge the hurt they had caused. And as the weeks turned into months, it became clear that the change I craved would have to come from within me, not from a family unwilling to let go of their superficial traditions. The turning point arrived on a crisp autumn evening when I attended a modest community gathering at a local cultural center. The hall was small, illuminated by the gentle glow of vintage lamps and filled with strangers who, like me, carried their own burdens of family discord. As the evening unfolded, people began sharing their stories, tales of neglect, of silent suffering, and of the bittersweet triumph of reclaiming one's identity. I listened, captivated by the raw honesty that filled the room. In those shared stories, I discovered a common thread: the courage to break free from expectations that no longer served us. It was a night of healing, A night when I realized that genuine connection was possible only when we embraced our imperfections and honored our own worth. That evening, an unexpected invitation arrived from a distant cousin with whom I had lost touch over the years. Her message was different, warm, sincere, and free from the obligatory formality that had become all too common in our family exchanges. She invited me to a small, intimate dinner at her home, promising a night of honest conversation and unpretentious company. I hesitated only for a moment, recalling the painful history of exclusion and half-truths. But something in her tone, a genuine invitation to be part of a real connection, compelled me to accept. At that dinner, away from the ostentatious displays and rigid expectations of my past, I finally experienced what it meant to belong without conditions. Conversations flowed naturally, and I shared my journey, my struggles, my revelations, and the strength I had discovered in standing up for myself. To my surprise, many nodded in understanding, revealing that they too had felt the sting of being undervalued by those they loved. In that space, I recognized that the bonds we form are not dictated by blood alone, but by empathy, respect, and shared vulnerability. Over time, as summer's golden light replaced autumn's crisp coolness, I began to notice subtle changes in how I related to the world around me. The wounds of the past did not vanish entirely, but they began to heal. I learned to view each scar as a badge of honor, a reminder of the battles I had fought and won, a testament to my resilience. I embraced the idea that the journey towards self-respect was ongoing, a continuous balancing act between vulnerability and strength. I found joy in small victories, a kind word from a friend, a quiet morning spent with a cup of coffee, or the simple pleasure of knowing that I was finally living life on my own terms. My family, for their part, continued to send their occasional, desperate messages. My mother's texts, filled with tentative apologies and reminders of family traditions, now stirred a quiet pity rather than the old sting of rejection. I realized that their inability to see me as an equal was not my failing, but theirs, a reflection of their own limitations and fears. While I chose to forgive in my heart, I no longer allowed myself to be drawn back into their orbit of superficial obligation. I maintained my boundaries, gently but firmly, knowing that every time I stood up for myself, I was affirming my right to be respected. As the years slowly unfolded, I built a new life, a tapestry woven with threads of authenticity, independence, and hope. I traveled to places I had once only dreamed of, met people whose lives enriched my understanding of what it meant to truly live, and immersed myself in creative pursuits that nurtured my soul. Each new experience became a stepping stone toward a future where I no longer defined myself by the approval of others, but by the strength of my own convictions. The painful Christmas, once a symbol of exclusion and betrayal, transformed into a turning point, a catalyst for a journey that would ultimately lead me to discover my true self. In quiet moments of reflection, I sometimes recalled the faces of those long-gone family dinners, the sound of half-hearted apologies, and the sting of cold indifference. But those memories, once bitter and raw, had softened with time. They served as gentle reminders of how far I had come, a record of a past I had transcended. I had learned that life is not measured by the expectations of others, but by the authenticity of one's own experience. I had discovered that true freedom lies in the courage to let go of the past, to accept oneself fully, and to build relationships that honor the truth of who we are. Now, standing at the threshold of a bright new future, I embrace every moment with gratitude. I no longer feel burdened by the weight of outdated expectations or the need to conform to an image that was never truly mine. I have learned to celebrate my individuality, to cherish the quiet victories, and to live a life defined not by external validation but by the deep, abiding respect I have finally found for myself. The scars of the past, once symbols of pain, have become emblems of resilience, a permanent reminder that I possess the strength to overcome, to transform, and to flourish. In the end, I realized that my journey was never solely about breaking free from a toxic family dynamic. It was about reclaiming my identity and rediscovering the power of self-love. Each step I took away from that painful Christmas was a step toward a future where I was free to be exactly who I was meant to be. And while the road ahead may still hold challenges, I now walk it with unwavering determination and the comforting knowledge that I am, at last, enough.